Okay, so there's a lot you can do with ClickUp in terms of the layout. So I want to kind of go over, the hierarchy, at least at a high level, at least as far as I see it. Let's bring over my kind of sample ClickUp sandbox thing that I've created here. Okay, so first of all, at the highest possible level, you have your teams, right? And I don't recommend setting up more than one team. The only reason I have 3 is because I have one that I set up for my personal, which I never ended up using. And then we also have one for 97 and up that's kind of like our sandbox that Greg and I like to play around in a lot to test out different features and things and see how things work. So generally speaking, I think you're going to just set up one team for your company, and that's where the billing happens. Is the billing is for each team, right? And the billing is there's different plans, and depending on how many seats you buy, you get so many guests that you can invite in to share. And I'm going to cover the sharing part a little later. There's different sort of levels of sharing. There's free people, and then there's guests is what they call them, when you're basically paying for them, and you have up to so many of those in your plan, and then you can pay additional for additional ones if you need them. And over here is where, and I'll cover this again later, but here when you're looking at your teams is where you can see who the people are who have been invited and where you can invite other paid guests. I'll show you where you can invite the free ones. So we'll get into all that. But the main thing here that I want you to get is that the highest possible level in the hierarchy of the structure in ClickUp is right here at the teams level. So you're probably going to set up one team like I've done here for your company. And then within that, you have some other levels to play in terms of what you can, what you can set up and where, right? So the team is going to be your company. And I also have notes on this, which I'm going to share when I post the recording of today's webinar. So the next level is the space. And this is where we start getting into some differences in terms of how we want to organize things. My feeling is to have a separate space for each client, because that gives me lots of room within that space to set up a lot of different things in case I do have, one-off projects and things that I want to manage for the client. It gives me the room to do that. And I like having space. I like having things spread out. And one of the things, because one of the concerns I think that comes up is, then, I have like stuff spread out all over the place. One, I don't really agree with that thinking, because you can see the list of spaces right here on my screen. These are all clients that I work with that I've set up in ClickUp. I have a lot of clients I don't need a project for because they're like, one-on-one training clients. I don't set up projects for those. But the point is, I don't find it difficult to access all the clients in the spaces. One of the problems I had with Asana was Asana didn't give you the choice. It was kind of like the way a lot of people are setting up ClickUp is they're using one space for all of their clients. And then you see how I have these. So this would be the space sandbox. And you see how I have this monthly accounting folder. The way others are doing it, they have one space for all their clients. This folder would be, they would have a folder like this for each client. Okay, and I think that gets messy and cluttered, and Asana kind of forces that structure on you, and that's why I hated Asana after a while, and I've tried it many times because I just found that after a while when I started adding a lot of projects, it got very cluttered and very difficult to find things because I had no way of spreading things out and no easy way that I could see where I could really kind of just organize and make the space that I needed. So I never liked Asana for that reason. So my feeling is you create a separate space for each client, because then I can have multiple projects, like, which are folders. Really, is originally that was what I had started to think of right away as how I would create a project, is at the folder level. And then within each folder, like you can see, I've got the monthly accounting folder, and then I've got lists. And as many of you know, I talk about how I do this in Slack, and I do it here. I fashion the lists after I start with the balance sheet, right? So as you can see, we've got a list for banking, for accounts receivable, accounts payable. Because to me, when you're doing monthly bookkeeping for clients, these are all the things that you have to manage for the client. It's pretty much everything on the balance sheet. The balance sheet is your checklist for what needs to get done. You take care of everything on the balance sheet week to week, and the month will take care of itself. That's the basic philosophy behind this, right? The banking, I'm going to manage all the bank feeds every week, and then once a month when the statement closes, I'm going to reconcile all the accounts. Same with the credit cards, right? Credit cards, to me, come under the heading of banking too, because they're basically, it's like I always call credit cards a reverse bank, right? A normal bank, you put the money in first and then you spend it. With a credit card, you spend it first and then you put the money in to pay them. So these are the things that we want to manage, right? And this is, kind of a simple version. And usually I'll start with something like this, and then I'll add things that I need if I need them as I go. Like here, you notice I also have a list for projections. So if I'm going to do forecasting or cash flow projections for a client, I'll add a separate list for that. This also could become its own project, by the way, if I decided that, I was going to be, if this is going to be a heavy area of focus and we're going to be doing very detailed financial modeling work for the client, then I would probably make projections its own folder rather than making a list within the monthly accounting. Although it kind of fits, you can go either way on that. Hopefully you can all pretty easily see why. So just backing up to the hierarchy, so this is my opinion. Of course, set it up the way it works for you. What I like to tell people all the time is what keeps me sober might get you drunk, so to speak, right? So the space is the client, and then the folder is the project. And then for me, the list is, are these items. So if we're talking monthly accounting, the list would be the section of within the financials that we're dealing with, right? So what do you call it? Again, the balance sheet is what I structure it off of. When you have things like payroll, which of course is on the P&L too, it's the payroll liabilities that gives rise to the fact that I need to, do payroll in here. So again, it's still kind of off the balance sheet, right? I added in loans payable when I was going through this last night, because I'll show you some suggestions I have, and I've got a sample task here for, how you might track the process of applying for these PPP loans, right? So we'll get to that in a little bit. So again, if you're taking notes, the team is your company, the space is your client, the folder is your project, and then the lists are the different sections of the financials or different areas within the monthly accounting project that you're going to want to be able to focus on. And just be careful about getting overly detailed, because the more lists you add, the more spread out things get. And at a certain point, it becomes difficult to manage, because it's like, where do I go? Now I can click on monthly accounting, and if I go back to the list view, it's going to show me everything across all of these lists, right? Based on the different statuses. And we'll get to the statuses in just a minute. So somebody have a question?
I do. How do you add a folder?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
I'll get to that. But real quick, since you asked, when I'm at when I go up to the space level, notice there's a plus sign here. And as I hover my mouse over it, it says create a folder or list, right? And that's one thing with ClickUp. You have to really pay attention to all these little things that you see, because there's a lot that you can do. Like when I click on this little ellipsis, it shows me how I can get into all the different space settings, right? Which actually brings us to the next thing, which is where you can establish what your statuses are. Notice on my right, within banking, I have WIP or work in process. I have something called unstarted, right? There's different statuses that you set so that when you create a task, you can establish what status it's in, right? So initially, you can set that up at the space level. When you're creating the space, you'll be in the space settings. Once it's been created, as you're seeing on my screen, this is where you go. So at the space level, you click the ellipsis, and you'll click here on where it says space settings. And so here you can have task statuses. So here's where I establish initially what the different statuses are that I'm going to want to use from the space level down, right? And then these can be overridden at the task level or at the list level. And I'm going to show you that as well, of course. So here's where you would establish the statuses. You can see clearly where you can add a status. You can rename these. This one that says unstarted, by default it comes in called open. You have to have an open status. It forces that on you. So I renamed it, and I prefer to call it unstarted, right? And then you also have to have a closed status, at least one. I renamed this and called it done, right? So if I've made any changes, I can review the changes and just confirm. And these will be the default statuses that get used at the space level. But now in monthly accounting, I can go edit folder statuses. So initially, it's going to use the spaces statuses. But if I want to, if for this particular folder, I want to do things a little differently, then I can go to custom, and I can establish a separate group of statuses, for this folder, right? And it might be that I'm using all the standard ones, but I might want one extra one that I really only need here, and I don't need it at the global space level, right? So again, it's the flexibility. You may not ever care to do this because it might create a lot of confusion. I can see where it could, because then after a while you have space statuses and you have different groups of statuses at different levels, so just be careful. Like I said at the very beginning, I want to caution you. when you're going to use a tool that's as robust as this, you really need to do some planning in terms of how you're going to use the tool. In other words, make sure that you have to kind of control the structure of the tool. Because if you try to let the tool drive how you structure things, you're going to get lost and confused in a product like this, right? So that's what the statuses are all about. And generally speaking, and now I need to bring my other screen back up here so I can stay focused on my notes. So generally speaking, you have an open status, which, like I said, I renamed and called it unstarted. And then I have WIP, or work in process. I have something I call waiting, or waiting on client, meaning just that I'm waiting for the client to get back to me with something. Pending kind of means it's on hold, it's waiting for something. And of course, if I put it in that status, I'll probably write a comment clarifying why it's in that status. I have a status for recurring. There are some things that I just want to keep in that status. They're never going to, because they're not really WIP, they're just always recurring, right? And it was something that I said, instead of using a recurring due date kind of thing, I will just put it in a recurring status, meaning every time I complete this task, I want to update the due date of that task, right? And then, of course, there's the done status. So that's the statuses. And again, this will all be in the notes that I'll give you after that. Now, the next thing is we have different views, right? And this is where I really wanted to spend some time today, because this is where ClickUp has started to get really, really powerful, right? So the first thing is we have the different task views, okay? And let me go back up to the sandbox level here, the space level. And by the way, if you need more room, I can collapse this sidebar here to get things out of the way, right? It just gives me some more sort of real estate to work with. And then if I click this arrow to expand it, there's a little thumbtack. That's what I mean. You have to look very carefully and pay attention to the little cues that the product has, because if I click that thumbtack, it will leave it collapsed. If I want it back out here, now I lost my thumbtack. Now it stays. Okay, perfect. So that little thumbtack will appear when it's not, pinned, so to speak, so that you can pin it like this and it'll stay up there. You can also resize it, right? If you move your mouse carefully over this region, I can leave it there, but I can shrink it up to give myself more space, but not lose sight of the sidebar altogether.
Seth,
right?
can you pause for a second? If you hover over the spaces section, there's a gear up at the top. Tiffany, there's a gear up at the top right there. You can click it, and then you can choose layout, size.
Yeah, I was actually going to get to that. That's in my outline.
Tiffany sent me a private message. So
Gotcha. Yeah, so you can go, as long as we mentioned it, you can go to layout, size, and style. And some people will like this one. I was playing with this last night. There's the original, which what it does is it puts these little icons on the left, and you can resize that. So this way you just see the icons, and you can customize the icons for your different spaces, so that it helps you get the visual cues about, which client or which project, you're actually looking at there on the left. So that's, again, some of you are going to like that. I like the modern one, right? I like just kind of seeing everything there, and then I can collapse it when I don't need it. You can also change, the default sort of, how compressed or wide things are. So the default is somewhere in the middle. I always like compact. You can do large. It kind of just puts more space around everything. You can kind of see it changing in the background as I make these selections, right? So definitely play around with these settings and decide that, how you want to do this, right? Because this is all, there's no right or wrong. This is all based on what's going to make it easy for you, easy on your eyes, easy to get and stay focused on the task at hand, right? That's kind of the main thing. Okay, Larry says, find the tree in the forest. So we have different views. What you're looking at here is the list view, right? Let me focus just on banking for a minute, right? Because it's just a little easier to see what's going on. Notice I've established the color of each of these lists. So banking is a green, and you can see the kind of green shading in the background. Again, it's another visual cue that helps you sort of figure out and pay attention to where you're at, or as I like to say, to what planet you're on, right? So we're on the banking planet right now. And as you can see, I've got a simple task that says reconcile XYZ, right? So this is the list view. The next view that we have is called the board view. Okay, so when I go to the board view, it takes my statuses and puts it in a Trello-like layout or a Kanban layout so that if something is going from work in process to waiting on client, let's say I need information from the client to finish this reconciliation, I can easily click and drag this. And by the way, this works really nicely on the mobile app. If you have to get the most recent version of the ClickUp mobile app. I was playing with it the other morning, and it's just a tap and hold and slide to the right, and it works beautifully, right? So this is an easy way to move things from one status to another, okay? And then there's the Gantt chart. To show you the Gantt chart, I'm going to go down to my projections folder, because this is where I was kind of playing around a lot last night. And then I'll minimize this so you can really see what's going on here. So I set up the projections folder, and within that I've got tasks. And then what I've also done is I've created a bunch of dependencies, meaning one task can't be completed until its predecessor is completed. So the projections, it gave me a good use case for laying out what this might look like. But you can imagine if you have a team of people working on different areas, this can be really useful. You can see my little icon that shows that these are all assigned to me, right? But if I wanted to, let's say I want to go into review and test, and I want to assign this to Greg. So I'm going to go in here, and notice what it does is it gives me these markers that let me know that it's waiting on all these other tasks. In other words, I can't review and test until everything before this has been completed. So it kind of locks it up. And what I want to do is I want to add Greg to this. So here's what I need to do, because Greg is not in this project yet. So I'm going to add him in. But what I want to do, I could add him right at the task level. I could just share this task with him. But I don't want to do that because that can create confusion. All Greg is going to see then is that one task. He's not going to see the bigger picture, that this task is part of projections, and that projections is part of, a bigger project called Client X or whatever it is, right? So what I want to do in this case is I want to share, especially because of the way that I've chosen to structure things, I want to share with Greg at the space level. So we're getting into the collaboration part here, what I'm showing you, right? So let me pin this back out for a second so I can stay focused. I don't know, I've lost that thumbtack. It seems to have gone away. So anyway, I'll go into the space settings, and, oh, sorry, never mind. I got to do this at the folder level. So we're going to do it at the monthly accounting folder level. And here I have my sharing and permissions. And I'm going to add Greg at the numbers guy.biz, right, Greg?
Yes, sir.
All right, so now it's going to add him as a free guest, right? Because I have 18 free guest seats available included in my plan. So, and here I can set his permissions. So I can say he can only view stuff, and that's always going to be free. I can let him comment, I can let him edit, or I can give him what's there as default, which is, he has full create and edit access, which I would want to give him here. And I'll click invite. Okay, so now Greg should get an email letting him know that I've invited him.
I have ClickUp open, and it pops in here saying, join the Nerd Enterprises Inc. workspace on ClickUp. So I'm going to click yes to join it.
Perfect.
And within seconds, I'm into that. I have the ability to view the entire monthly accounting space.
Right, or folder, right, within the space. Now, yeah. I believe if I add you as kind of an owner, then you could see things at the space level. So the space level is reserved for people I add on my team, which is not a guest, and I could do that, and and that would be like buying an extra seat. And with each seat, you get so many additional. I think it's 5 additional guests per seat that you buy. So I have 3 of us in here on my team because I have myself, Erica, and Kelly. So 3 times 5 is 15 seats plus the 5 that I get initially. So I have 20 seats that I can use based on my current plan. That's a little bit into how the pricing works with this. Okay, so now back to the Gantt view of my projections project. I'm going to close this up. Now I can go into review and test, and I can assign this to Greg. See, there he is. And it's already got the start and due date and everything. Now, when you're using the Gantt chart view, you definitely want both the start and the due date, because you can see now how this gets really clearly laid out in the timeline, right? So if I go to a client and I say, okay, we're going to start your projections. I'm going to send you a bill on April 10th. We're going to get started. And it's going to take 2 weeks to do, meaning the whole project is due on April 24th. This gives me a really nice, clear view where I can say, okay, first I have to set up the framework and the template, which when it comes to projections means I got to get the balance sheet, the P&L, and the statement of cash flows all built out and balanced based on the historical data. That's the first phase of setting up the projections. That's what setup framework and template means, right? I know what that means. A lot of these, the way you want to set these things up is you don't have to write a novel on each thing. It's just enough for me to know. When I read this, I know what needs to be done. Now, if I was assigning this task to somebody else who may not be as clear as me, then of course in the task, I would provide a lot of additional information in the description. And of course here we can have comments, and there's lots of other things I can add to a task. I've got custom fields here for full name and email. You'll see where that comes in. I'm going to show you something just about the end of the hour that's really cool that I played around with last night. I was like, oh my God, I don't know if even Greg knows about this yet. And you'll see what I mean, Greg, when I get to that. Right, so here I've just got a really clear layout, and as you can see, from this view I can drill right in. I could also easily click and drag and change the time frame. I could say, you know what, Greg might say, hey Seth, 2 days of reviewing and testing isn't going to be enough time on this. So I could say, fine, you know what, the balance sheet really doesn't need all this time. Let's back this up a day, right? And you see what that does? It just backs everything up, and you can see from the arrows what all the dependencies are. Right, and if you click into any one of these tasks, you'll see this is waiting on setting up the framework, but it's also blocking the balance sheet and the review and test, because this task, right, which is the expenses part, in other words, my philosophy on this is we got to do the P&L before we do the balance sheet in terms of the projections and the assumptions and so on. So you can see both sides. This is dependent upon setting up the framework and template, meaning this one can't be done until that's completed. But it's also blocking the balance sheet and the review and test phases because, you know, those things can't be done until the expense part has been completed. And that's all up to you, how you want to set that up. This is how I decided to set it up when I was laying this out last night. So what I love about this is it really gives you the ability to get organized and plan a project from start to finish and everything that happens in between and exactly what order everything needs to happen in. Right, and as you can see, the tasks are also here on the left. These are also clickable. I can click right into review and test from here, and boom, there I am. And so when it comes time for Greg to do this, you know, Greg can start commenting in here and saying, okay, I see all the other tasks have been completed. Or if Greg knows he's supposed to start this on the 21st and the predecessor tasks haven't yet been completed, he can go in and write a comment here and say, hey, what's going on with the balance sheet stuff? I need to start my review and test process, you know, let me know. And it could be that it's done and some knucklehead like me just forgot to mark the task complete, right? So I love the Gantt view when you need a lot of structure and planning around a project, right? It's really, really powerful. And the projections were a really good use case for doing that. The other view that I want to show you, which is really cool, is the calendar view. Now remember, we're in the projections part specifically, so we're only looking at that. But if I look at the calendar view, again, I can clearly see the project projections, right? And all the different tasks and their dates, you know, when they're supposed to be getting work done and completed. So the calendar view is also really cool. What's even cooler about the calendar view is I can back up a level and just do the monthly accounting in the calendar view. And at that level, I hadn't established that view yet. So we're going to click View, and I'm going to click Calendar, and I'll just click Add View. And now I'm seeing everything in monthly accounting and all the dates. Right now, most of it is just the projections, but notice I have this task that was due on Wednesday called Get My Stuff Done. And then Thursday, I have another task called Do This. It was established Thursday. It's due today, right? So you can see the different things. There's lots of little options under the hood. You know, by default, it's doing the color coding based on the color of the list that the thing is in, right? These are gray because they're actually in a status of unstarted, right? These are, I believe, in the banking level. And Do This is unstarted, right? So that's the calendar view. The other thing that we have that's really cool, especially if you have a team, and I think I put this at the top level here, is we have the box view. Maybe I didn't keep that one. So if I go here and I add the box view, this is a way of managing resources. So now I can see in this view, I have some stuff that's unassigned. I have a lot of stuff that's assigned to me and one thing that's assigned to Greg. And it gives me a little schematic here of the workload. So when I look at this, I might look at this and say, you know, Greg looks like he's got some time on his hands. Maybe I can offload some of these tasks to him, right?
Hey.
What?
Clearly, I have nothing but time on my hands right now.
Exactly. You have one thing to do, Greg, just review and test.
That's all I'm doing right now.
So the box view is really good for managing teams. If it's just one or two of you, it may not be that useful. Then again, maybe it is. It's definitely not going to be much help if you're a one-person show, right? But so the box view is really cool, where it's applicable and useful, okay? Now, those are all the task views. So again, we have lists, we have the board, right, which I showed you is like the Kanban chart. We have the Gant, which is what I showed you with the projections. We have the calendar, and then we have the box view. Those are all under the major heading of task views, right? Then we have page views, and this is where things get really cool. So one of the things I was playing with last night, Greg and I were kind of looking at this together yesterday, is if I go to the banking level here, I noticed that, because Greg and I were talking about, could we perhaps eliminate Slack and just use Clickup and do all the Slack-like things in Clickup? We were toying with the idea. And at first we were thinking, well, because there's so many areas where you can add comments, right? Even at the folder level, I can get into the folder's properties and I can add comments based on the folder itself, right? So there's lots of little things you can do and lots of things you can do in different places. But we both agreed pretty quickly initially that it would get messy very quickly in terms of trying to track what conversations were where. But what could be useful, especially if you're going to decide to use ClickUp and collaborate with your clients, is, for example, in the banking list here, I've added a banking chat. So there's what they call a page view that takes on the form of a chat. And you'll see that here when you go to add views, right? And now you can see the breakdown, the task views that I just went over, and now we're going to look at the page views. One of them is a chat. So while you're in the banking list, you would add that view, which I did here, and I could say start chat. And then it's just that. It's a chat. It's a conversation that we're having around the subject of all the banking stuff. So I can say, hey, Greg, can you help with bank recs? It looks like you aren't really doing anything. Right, and I can post that, and notice I've tagged Greg, and it even does the emoji thing, right? So this might be a great way to collaborate and communicate with your clients. If you need very detailed communications with the client, I wouldn't necessarily recommend relying on this over Slack. It might be a good thing kind of in addition to, as an enhancement. So, this is definitely an option for, how you can communicate with clients if you're going to collaborate with them. This can be incredibly useful so that you have it very focused. And Greg says, no, he says, F off, I'm busy. Who are you to tell me what I'm doing or not doing? Right? And you can create, again, you can create these views at any level. I created this at the list level. We could also create a chat at the monthly accounting level, right? So it would be more of a global, here's a chat that we use to talk about the whole picture, right? Again, you have to be careful with the balance of how much you put in where, because it could get real confusing real quick, right? So just be careful, and like I've said a few times, and I'll keep saying it, you really need to plan out and think about how you want to organize and use these things, right? So we have the chat. Next, we have documents, okay? And again, like any of these views, they can be established or employed at any level. So if I go up to the top level, the space view, the sandbox, I'm going to skip over this one for a minute. I've got a document, which is one of the specific types of views that you can add. And notice I have reference information. I create this, and if I click here, it'll expand so I can create all different pages. So this becomes like a whole notebook at the space level that I can use to manage information. So this could get me out of a thing like OneNote, right? If I'm using this with my clients, I don't need OneNote because I have, instead of having different, well, it's really a different notebook at each client level if I'm using spaces for clients. And then I can add all the pages I want. Meeting notes, right? And then I can add sub pages. So I can go here alongside meeting notes. And so it creates a sub page. So this would be like the master meeting notes notebook. And then over here, I'd say meeting 2020 0410, right? And so if I have a meeting with the client, if we're on Zoom, I can take my notes here, and it keeps things nice and neat and organized and exactly where I need them. So now it's just, again, it's just one less other place I need to go for information about the client.
We drop an attachment into there.
Are you suggesting that I try it, or are you?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Or
here in
you
the
must
meeting
have.
notes, let's say I have a PDF I'm going to drag over here. And sure enough, when I drag and drop it, I can put this bank statement PDF, this sample bank statement I've got right here in the notes. And
Or
I
a
can,
video.
right, or a video. Yeah, you can kind of add or embed anything you can think of. It's like, that's the thing about ClickUp, is like every time the first thing I noticed about this product and what made me fall in love with it, and what keeps making me fall more in love with it, is I feel like they just somehow they think of everything with everything they add to it, So this makes it really neat and easy. And I see in the chat, Larry says, that Slack just updated and improved. It definitely did. And I actually posted something about that in our group the other day. But does Slack really provide you with the infrastructure for good note keeping? No, it doesn't. You can link documents in Slack very nicely, but it's not where I would want to rely on keeping my permanent notes that I want to be able to refer back to, right? And the other thing you'll see, and I feel like I'm sort of famous for this, is I always have some kind of a reference doc, and these have lived in different places over the years, but now that we've got this infrastructure in Slack, in ClickUp, notice what I do. So this is a link that I put in directly to the website of this client's Google Drive folder. So I can click on this, and it'll take me right into that client's folder in Google Drive, right, where I have the banking. Okay, over here I have the local folder. So it's not a link, but I can copy this, Control-C, and I can open up a Windows Explorer window. So I'll just open up a new Explorer window. By default it went to my drive, but now I can click in here and paste that file path in, and boom, now I'm instantly on the local side. This is the streamed side of my Google Drive folder for this client. So this is the local equivalent of what I've opened up here. And when I'm working on a client's stuff, I like having it open in both places, because as I've often pointed out, especially when we've done our deep dives on G Suite, is it's a lot easier to do file management from the Windows Explorer side versus the web side. So I do a lot of that here, but then there's a lot of things I want to do on the website, like Google's native documents, right? In terms of things that I want to keep track of in documents, or if I want to create a new Google Sheet, that's easier to do on the website. So I definitely like to create reference information that makes it easy for me to get to both places. And notice I've also, because most or all of my clients get a Smartsheet workspace, so I've linked that here as well. So that way, ClickUp becomes command central for any time I'm working on that client. And in that, I've created the trail of breadcrumbs that I need to get me out to all the other peripheral tools that I might be using at any time when I'm working on that client's stuff, right? So again, this is just me using the different tools, and because I've taken the time to really learn as much as I can about the different things these tools can do and how they do them, this is me putting together my ecosystem for how I work on my client's stuff, right? And so it's really cool because it's really organized. And my whole thing is I can't stand having to struggle to find something, right? So my whole rule, what keeps me from getting very stressed out, is that I organize things in such a way that no matter how long it's been, and when I have no independent recollection of what I did or where something is, I can still find it in 30 seconds or less, right? That's the name of the game here, and that's what this is all about. It's about using the tools and creating the infrastructure within the tools that helps me accomplish that. Okay, the next thing I want to look at is an embed. Now, one thing I use Smartsheet for with my clients is over here, and I'm in actual Smartsheet right now just to show you, is I always have a project in Smartsheet called Request for Information, because Smartsheet is really well designed for this kind of thing. So I'm going to create a new task here, but before I do, I want to show you the embed version, or the Embed Doctype that ClickUp offers. So notice here I have that little symbol, by the way, means code. It's where you can drop code into something. And so there's a code type of doc that you can add in. It's called embed. Notice there's that symbol, where I was able to embed Smartsheet. And I got this from Greg. Greg is the one who taught me, that you could do this and how to do it.
Not
so
to
when
be
I click
confused with the Chinese fortune cookie game where you read your fortune and then say in bed.
Jesus, okay. Perfect. So I've got this request for info project set up in here, which makes it easy again so that from one place I can access my client's stuff. And the way I've got this set up is I've got automations in here that I'll show you how I set them up. But I'm going to task Greg with something now. And then, Greg, I'm going to make it so that you can share your screen. I have to change that setting because I had locked that down. And because after I task you with this, before you do anything, I want you to share your screen and show everybody what it looks like from your side. So, but hang on, let me task you with it. So right from within here, I can say something I need from Greg, and I guess they want it to be something, so that's fine. We can fix that. Okay, over here I can write a comment. Right, go away with that. Hey, at Greg. I guess you can't tag in the comments. I thought maybe you could. I need that thing right now. Right, and just hit enter. So I've got my comments alongside. Right, the request date is going to be today. The due date is going to be today. I need it now. Right, no URL applicable. And over here under assign to, I'm going to assign it to Greg. Now the other thing that I wanted to show you all, which is pretty cool, that I discovered last night, is another doc type. And Greg, I don't know if you've seen or played with this, but you can add
I'm sorry, I just finally got the request for information.
All right, so share your screen because I want to see what this looks like. I want everybody else to see what this looks like. See, it does work. It takes a minute, but I promise it works. So here it is. In fact, now you got like 2 of them, right? So go ahead and click on that.
So you didn't just click here?
Yeah, you can click there, or you could have clicked log. Well, login might just take you to your own Smartsheet login. So boom, it takes him right here, and now he can see the whole thing, right? And now he can respond to these things and address them. And so if Greg was my client, this is a great way for me to just, when I need information from him, add these requests, assign them to him, and and that way Greg gets notified, within a couple of minutes that I need something. Okay, and as you're seeing on screen, Greg can go in there and he can easily, update or change something. And
so while I'm sharing my screen, I may as well show what I see of Seth's team, of Seth's space. All I see in ClickUp is the monthly accounting. That's the only.
Right, you can't see the space level. He's one level beneath that.
Okay, I'm also only seeing Seth one doc.
Yeah, and that's a different reference information doc, which is at the folder level and not the space level. The one I showed was at the space level.
So Greg, right now, how do you know which client what space this is if all you can see is the monthly accounting?
Well, that's where I think I'd qualified it earlier. When you're sharing with somebody, you have to take that specifically into account, Tiffany, so that if this were a real live use case, I wouldn't just call it monthly accounting. I would call it client X monthly accounting.
Okay.
So that Greg knows for sure exactly who this is. The other thing I could do is I could share it with him at the space level. To do that, I'd have to pay for a seat for him in my plan.
See, in mine, all of my workers, they see all of the spaces, right?
Right, because they're team members, not just guests.
And they're team members, so they see the context under which they're going in there and looking at the weekly stuff and so on and so forth.
Right. So now Greg's going into our 97 and up sandbox.
Oh, yeah, I went into the wrong one.
That's okay.
There we go.
So it just depends, because you can also share at the task level specifically, but then he's really not going to have context. So I can almost see no use case in which I would find that useful to just share a singular task with somebody. But I suppose there might be use cases for it. Bottom line, ClickUp just gives you all the flexibility to decide what you want to do and where and when you want to do it, right? So let me take the ball back because I want to show you this last thing before the hour is up. And Greg, I don't know if you've played with the forms yet. So this is where we can take it the other direction. So here I showed you how we can embed a Smartsheet project. And by the way you do that in Smartsheet, if you click this little globe, you have your publish options, right? And so you can get the code, right? So let's say I want to have, I really want edit by anyone access on there. So over here, I can get the link, and I get this embed code. You don't need to understand what any of it means. You just need to know how to select and copy it. And then when you add the view for the code, I'll just edit this one for a minute. You'll get this box where you literally just paste it in, right? So you don't need to understand the code.
You want to make sure that what you're sharing in Smartsheet is something that you don't mind potentially having exposed to the world. Otherwise, click on the only available to users in the owner's account, and that limits it a little bit more. No. Go down, edit by anyone, get link, and then change it to available to users in the owner's account.
Right. So this way, if somebody was in ClickUp who wasn't actually in the Smartsheet workspace with sharing permissions, they wouldn't be able to access this. So that's a very good point. Thank you.
Because we track all of our logins in
Smartsheet, right.
And clearly I wouldn't want to have that available on the interwebs.
Yep, no question. So again, this is how I can request information from the clients, but last night I played with a feature I had not really noticed before. That is how you can go the other way. So let's say you want to give your client a really cool way to task you with something. And the way I did that is I noticed that you could create a form. And so I've got that up here. I'm at the space level. I've got something I decided to call client tickets, right? And so you can build a form right off the fields that you have available. And that's where I added in 2 custom fields to capture their full name and email, because the idea here is I could create I wouldn't do this in a client specific space. I would probably do this I could do an individual form for each client, but let's say I wanted to just do one form that I can share with all clients so that any client who wants to task me with something can use that one form. And then I can easily move tasks around. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is just do a different form for each client. So it's just based on whatever is going to be more manageable for you, right? So here in this use case, I've set it up at the client level in the sandbox, right? So I build the form. I provide for them to give me their name and email. Notice it's all required. And then notice on the left, the list to save the tasks, because this is going to create a task. So I created a list called tickets. And now I'll move this to the top. You can see how easy it is to reorganize these things. So I want the tickets to be at the top, because if there's a new ticket from a client, I want it to drop in right at the top, and then I can move it to the appropriate, list for banking or AR or whatever the task relates to, right? And so when I set up this form, I can click here where it says View Form. You can also share it, and that's where you can get embed code, so you can embed it into a page on your website. That would be for the global one form for everyone use case, and you just put it on your website and give it to clients to use. But if we're sticking with the example of doing a specific one per client, I could go View Form. I could take this URL and give it to my client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the chat, Greg, because I want you to use this and I want you to task me with something. I want everybody to see how cool this is. So you copy and paste that out of the chat in Zoom. So Greg's going to fill this out, and he's going to use this. You can even drag and drop files to attach, and he can hit submit, and he can tell me when it needs to be started, if he needs me to start it right away, when he needs it done by, right? There's space for a description, and I've made all this required, right? So Greg's going to fill that out real quick, and then and let me know when he's done.
It's not exactly clear what the start date and due date are, but whatever.
What do you mean?
Well, from a client's perspective.
Well, really, the due date for sure, they need to be able to say, this is when I need it by. The start date could just be the day they're making the request, you don't have to make that required. That's just how I chose to do it.
So it popped up over on my screen over here.
Okay, so you're done?
Tiny, yeah.
So now if I go to, and by the way, there's also a redirect URL. So after you filled that out, it should have taken you to my 97 and up page.
Yep.
So everybody else, feel free to give me tasks, and then it'll redirect you to the 97 and up page. So I thought that was pretty cool too, that you could, point them somewhere specifically after they've hit the submit button. Probably a good thing to do here would be to redirect it right back to the form so that they can add more tasks. So now if I click on tickets, I should see what Greg tasked me with, right? So Greg added more cowbell.
Well, actually, Greg didn't do that.
Oh, that was probably Josh.
That's probably Josh.
That sounds like a Josh thing. So which one was you? Because I think I did these two.
Do this now.
Oh, that's yours. Okay. And so here it is. And he added a PDF attachment, uploaded it, right? He can add, this is where his description comes in. And so basically I get this and I get notified, and it'll show up on all the things that are assigned to me and that are due tomorrow, right? So this is a great way to give your clients an easy way to let you know when there's something they need from you. Let's say, and you can explain to them, let's say they need a report. Let's say they're filling out their PPP loan and they need you to get them their 941s. They can go and use that form, task you with it, and say, I need to get this loan app in tomorrow, so tomorrow's the due date. Tomorrow's the drop dead date, right? So it's just a really cool way to, again, it's all about making it easy for you and for your clients. I think the priority should always be making it easier for your clients. The easier you can make their lives, the more sticky your services are. Because if they leave you, they're going to leave all this really cool stuff that you've employed that makes it really easy for them to communicate and collaborate with you. And most importantly, at the end of the day, get things done, right? And so if this do this now thing that Greg gave me was a banking related task, all I have to do is move it by clicking this guy here, and it gives me the list, and I can say, okay, let's move this into banking, and let's move it to a WIP status, right? And whatever, I can make comments, I can do anything I want to from there. But you'll notice now when I go back down here, it's no longer here in tickets, it's now in banking. But keep in mind, banking, the last place I was at was the chat. So I go back to list, and there it is, do this now. And it's assigned to me, due date of tomorrow.
One other thing to show people really quickly is there's that bell over along the left-hand side with the pink dot on it.
Which is notifications.
That's your notification. So when we filled out those bells, those forms, you got notifications in there that the ClickBot is saying these to you.
Right. Yep, and here's more cowbell, and yeah, and I actually do use this to check in a lot. It even shows me the chat, so this is a good place to go into. A lot of times I know people are like, okay, where do I start? I want to see all the newest things I need to do, and this is where you go for that specifically. There's also, you can create different dashboards now. So I created a dashboard called Seth's Shit, and it's basically everything that's assigned to me that's either late or due today, right? So you can, there's a lot that I didn't even show you today. I mean, this is, I think, a pretty good deep dive on everything. One thing regarding the users is if I wanted Greg to see the full context of the spaces, I could go here to people, and I could invite him as a full member. Then he would be able to see the spaces, right?
And
Notice
you
I
have to pay for me at that point.
Right, and I'd have to pay for him at that point. Although giving you full edit access uses up one of my seats anyway, so it's in a way it's paying, even though I've already paid for that seat. It's one more that I'm using against the total 20 that I have available based on my current plan.
But it's only a guest seat.
Yeah, but it's only a guest seat, which means there's no way to make him allow him to see things at the space level unless I go here and say, let's make him a full member. Then I'll be paying for one extra seat, right?
Hey, Seth?
Yeah.
You usually say that when you start out, you go with the free version. When would you not use the free version? What functionality would you need to upgrade?
I mean, that's very subjective. It really just depends on, and there's different mindsets, I think, that people have around that kind of thing specifically. In my case, I'm usually pretty quick to want to just pay for something because I find value in having access to the features that paying for the thing gets me access to. Some people will stop at all costs to avoid having to pay for something. And that's fine. If that's your deal, then the best answer I can give you, which unfortunately is a little generic, is you use the free version until you bump into something that you need so badly that you have to pay for it because it's that important to you.
Well, I'm thinking of looking for a replacement for Wunderlist since Microsoft's pulling the plug. with the
Well,
free
if you want a
version?
replacement for Wunderlist and you want something that's exactly like Wunderlist, then check out ZenKit to do, because they built it. You'll see it looks exactly like Wunderlist. They built it that way purposely. So
Okay.
So if you're looking for a replacement for Wunderlist, this is like bringing a tank to a knife fight if what you're used to is Wunderlist, right?
Okay, but I mean, it's
But if you like the robustness of this, then this is definitely, like I always say, try it. Stick one client in there, start working with one client on it and see how it goes, and keep using Wunderlist or move over to the ZenKit to do for now, because that's going to be very familiar. And just that's how you test it, right? That's kind of the lean startup method. Test one client with Clickup, see how it goes, and at a certain point you'll either say, okay, I'm all in, I have to use this for everybody, or you'll hesitate because you'll say, there's certain things that I'm not so sure about, right? And so it's kind of an organic process that way.
so that's how you'll find out when you try to do, if you just start with the free version. And which version do you use?
I have their business plan. I have
Okay.
their highest plan short of going enterprise, right? And I needed that because, like I said, I pay for 3 seats, which gets me 20 guests, up to
Okay.
20 guests. I don't use the guests very often. I don't yet collaborate with a lot of clients on this, because normally with clients, I just bring them into a Smartsheet workspace, and that's where I tend to do the collaborative stuff. But I'm probably going to move more in the direction like Greg is moving, where I'm going to do more and more in ClickUp, because as I've shown you today, I can take what I'm doing in Smartsheet and be specific about it and share those things. Like, I love the idea that right in ClickUp, while I'm working on the client, and that becomes my command central, if I'm working on something, I'm like, oh crap, I need something I don't have, I can go into my request for information, task the client with it, and know that they'll get notified. And then of course it's a matter of training my client to be responsive to those things, right? And in the beginning especially, you will have to spend time training your client. There's no getting around that. Usually the way I do that is I do a few Zooms right at the beginning when I'm onboarding the client and explain to them, you're going to get these notifications. Let me put one in right now as a test. Let me make sure you get it. Share your screen, client. I want to see the notification in your inbox. And then while they're sharing their screen, I show them exactly like Greg showed, where to click, and I make sure that they click over and they understand they're looking at Smartsheet and they understand what to do. I do that with them once. I record that session in Zoom. I send them that recording and say, this is where you go. Of course, I'm here if you do have questions. But, I think it's a critically necessary component of the onboarding process to plan on training your clients. Teach them how to use your systems, because what I've noticed is if you don't teach them how to use your systems, they're going to start teaching you how to use theirs. And that's exactly the opposite of what they hired you for, right? And then you get frustrated because you're like, wait, I have all these different clients and all these different systems. Well, duh, that's because you let the clients dictate what the systems are instead of you telling them. And the truth is they're counting on you to tell them. But if you don't do that, then they start getting lost themselves and wondering, okay, well, I guess I need to create the systems, right? So right from day one, in the onboarding process, you get on a few Zooms with the client, you show them what your systems are, you show them how it works, you make sure they understand it, and like Josh just posted in the chat, be the doctor, not the patient, when you're treating your clients. Right? I love that. I love that expression. But it's so important. And I think that's why a lot of people get kind of lost on how to work with their clients from onboarding to maintenance, is because they haven't taken the time to really get clear themselves on and establishing the systems for how you're going to work with clients. You have to be clear on that yourself first, then you make the clients clear about it. And I love ClickUp because it is robust. It's got a lot of moving parts, but what do they say? With great power comes great responsibility, something like that. It's just, you can do a lot with it, and you can really use it as command central to manage everything from one place. And even with other apps in the mix, you can bring those apps into that one command central location. That's one of the things I really love about ClickUp, is it gets us back to that. I don't want to have to go to 6 different places to see what I need to manage. I want it all in one place. That doesn't mean I can't use other tools like Smartsheet, but this gives me the power to embed what I need. Now, the embedded version of Smartsheet doesn't have everything. You might have noticed I can't access the automation workflows in that embedded version of Smartsheet. But again, very easy to get out to the actual Smartsheet project. And as Greg pointed out, you want to be careful about your sharing when you set that up. So there's definitely some assembly required here, but once you've got that system nailed down and you've got that assembly done, first of all, you can save anything as a template. I forgot to show you this real quick, and then I got to run, and I think probably some of you do as well. In the loans payable, I have the PPP loan app task, and I've laid it all out generically. Here's the instructions, right? Here's an Excel file, loan calculator that I got from one of my clients' banks. And so I have this whole task laid out with the subtasks. I have to do the application. There's a due diligence form in this one client's case. I need all the payroll journals from 2019 and 2020. I need the 2019 940. I need the 941s for both years. I can click into the subtask, and I've made that clear. I need 2019 in the first quarter of 2020, right? In another week or so, I might even be able to, no, it's the 941 I'll be able to get for the first quarter soon, for this year so far. But what I can do once I've got that all built out is I can come in here and I can save this as a template. So now I can take this PPP loan task and I can replicate it for every client that I need it for, right? So again, there's so much under the hood. I went deep today, but I could go a lot deeper. I could spend a whole day teaching how to use this stuff, right? And it's powerful. It's powerful. You can do a lot with it. And when you learn how to use the tool and learn how to use it well, and first you have your process for how you're going to use it, so then you apply the tool to the process, then it becomes really clear and slick in terms of how you're going to work with clients and what you're going to be able to do. And it saves time, because now that series of tasks that are included in the PPP loan app process, again, it would take me an hour probably to set that up for each client or something like that. With this, like I showed you, I can save it as a template and then just bring that into every client who I want to do the loan app for, and I can do that at every level. I can make a template out of a space. I can make a template out of a folder. I can make a template out of a task. So again, it's very, very powerful stuff, but you do need to plan on setting aside the time to learn the tool, right? If I handed you a toolbox to do some fix-it work around the house, you would need to know how to use the tools that are in that toolbox. And this is no different. This is your accounting toolbox. By the way, I have a course coming up soon that I'm going to be producing called The Accountant's Toolbox. And it's going to go over this and a whole lot of other apps. It's basically going to be your app. It's going to be like a virtual exhibit hall of apps, my style, where I'm going to teach you how to use the apps. And so you're not going to use them all, but you're going to be able to go in there and play with all the different ones and watch the videos and see how they work and decide which ones are going to work best for you. So that's coming probably a few months out, because it's a lot of work to produce, because it's going to be a lot of apps and a lot of videos and a lot of screenshots and templates and other things that you can download in goodies. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. I literally have a client waiting for me in Slack to jump into a call. So I need to do that. I will see you all on the flip side. If Gina's doing her hangout, go to SBAA on Facebook and join her hangout today. It's, I think, 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern. They talk for half an hour.
It starts at 2.
Starts at 2 now. They talk for half an hour, then go live.
Yeah, basically it starts at 2 where we just kind of BS and decide on the topics, and then, sorry, Tiffany, and then 2:30 to 3 is the actual recording, and then afterwards we talk.
Right. Then you have wine and cake virtually. I don't know. Anyway, I got to go. I'll see you all.
Happy Easter weekend, everyone.
Happy Easter. Happy Passover.
Happy Passover.
Right.